All right, I am on. Good to see everybody here tonight. We're missing some folks, but that's the way it is sometimes. Pat's got, that's right, she hasn't she? Yeah. Pat's in Texas. Gail has fell, I think we mentioned, she fell and broke her, well, she thought she'd broken her foot. She actually broke her ankle. So she was at the doctor, and then she developed bronchitis again. So she's just having a lot of issues. So remember Gail, and of course Becky can't come unless Gail comes. So she's not able to be here either. So please remember them in your prayers. Tanis is at home and doing much better. Please continue to remember her as she recuperates. Also, her cousin, I think it's her cousin in Alabama, is actually doing much better. So prayers are working, and he is on the mend, slowly, but he is on the mend. So please remember him in your prayers. Also remember Dan's father and mother. Both of them have some serious health issues and are moving into assisted living. They've been trying to decide that, and his mother was very, very much opposed to it. His father really didn't care; he was fine with it. But after this last week when she fell outside of their home, she realized that it was no longer safe for them to be at home by themselves. So that changed her mind. I don't think she's not happy about it still, but at least she's open to the idea that that's going to be something they need to do. So please remember Dan's mom and dad, Tanis's cousin in Alabama. Tanis, she's continuing to recuperate, and that whole family. So please do that. Trying to remember, there was one I didn't write it down. Miss Ura's not here. She's her office. Okay, all right, good. Yeah, you may not have realized that we started. She may be in the middle of something. That's fine. That's okay. That's all I can think of as far as sick. Anybody else? Yeah, don't want anybody else sick. Anybody else? All right. Trying to think. Reminder of, of course, everybody here already knows. Next Sunday is our fellowship dinner, so just a reminder to bring lunch for yourself and for a guest. And we'll have our fellowship dinner immediately after our morning service and our song service right after that. We'll have some good fellowship. Next Sunday will be a good fellowship day. That's all I have. No, I didn't change. I know. I did look. Yeah. I didn't get here today, so I'll be here tomorrow. All right. If there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and have a word of prayer. Father in heaven, we're thankful for the day that you've blessed us with, Lord. We ask, Lord, that you continue to bless those who are recuperating from illnesses, especially be with Sister Tanis as she's recovering from the appendicitis and the surgery that she had to undergo. We ask, Lord, that you bless her and give her speedy recovery so she can be back with us on Lord's Day. We ask your blessings, Lord, on those who have been mentioned as being sick under doctor's care, are about to undergo procedures and surgeries, and some whose health is not good and is unfortunately getting worse. And we pray, Lord, your blessings on them, that if it's your will that they regain their health. Be with those who are traveling and give them safety to where they're going and back to us again. We ask that you give them safety, but also help them to do the things that they need to do as they travel. We ask, Lord, that you bless those who have lost loved ones, and we ask that you comfort them and strengthen them, help them to come to an understanding of your strength that they can access because you want them to. You want to uplift people who need uplifting. We ask, Lord, that you bless our congregation, be with Central, and be with the things that we're doing here. Be with our members. Be with our family members, be with our friends. Help us to be a shining light in the community. Help when people look to the church, they see exactly what they're supposed to see, a body of believers that are worshiping together in spirit and in truth. Bless us, Lord, through our study, and keep us safe as we lead. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, last week we got into a study of what is suffering. So if you want to go ahead and turn to Job chapter 3, we're going to continue on from there. Job chapter 3 and starting in verse 20. Yeah, this concept here is kind of an interesting concept. The idea of suffering it is part of the human condition. We just mentioned that last week, right? If you're human, you're going to suffer at some point. No matter what it is, you're going to suffer at some point. Some of us get a lot of our suffering in when we're young. That the young fellow that passed away from up in Woodstock, Carson, he had his suffering when he was young. Didn't survive that suffering. He has gone on to a better place, but sometimes we get our suffering in when we're young. Sometimes we avoid it, and then towards the end of our life is when we have more suffering. We start to lose our friends and start to lose our family and start to lose our loved ones, and our health is not so good. And everybody's suffering is a little bit different, isn't it? Some of us suffer in the flesh. We suffer physically. Our health is not good. And I dare say everybody here knows at least one person who has suffered physically most of their life. They've had problems, physical problems, health problems most of their life. There are other ways to suffer, aren't there? Absolutely. We discussed this last week. You've got men and women who have been married, and they've lived, by all accounts, a pretty good life, and then death takes one of them, and then they're suffering. And they deal with it the very best way they can. And I found that most of the times that people who deal with it very well are those who have a strong faith. And they realize the great thing about it is, they're going to see their loved one again if they're in the Lord. A lot of it is, yes, absolutely. And that goes into a lot of different spheres of living, right? Bad decisions. You talk to somebody who's suffering from cirrhosis of the liver. You ask them, if you could go back, would you take that first drink? They'll say no. If I had the willpower, no, I would not. Those people are suffering with lung cancer. Have you ever seen somebody die of lung cancer? It's a tormented process. And you ask them, if you could go back, what would you do? I'd knock that cigarette out of my hand. I wouldn't take that first drag on that cigarette. Yeah, absolutely. People suffering from diseases and all that kind of stuff, a lot of it is due to bad decisions, just poor decisions. You know what? It only takes one decision to ruin the rest of your life. Yeah. And that gets into the idea of it's not always in the flesh. Sometimes we suffer because we see a loved one engage in a pattern of behavior that we weep for them. We're miserable for them. We see them go down this road. And especially, if you're a parent and you've seen your child go down a road, and I'm not talking about a minor episode of rebellion where they get out and they do their thing and then they realize pretty quickly, hey, it's not so great out here. They come back. I mean, you see parents and they are in a constant state of mourning because their children or whoever, a family member or whatever it might be, has made decisions that while the person themselves is not suffering, they are in sin. They are lost. And you weep for them and you pray, if there's a chance, let them come back. If there's a chance, and they're always casting about, what can I say, what can I do? And we suffer. And it's not always in the flesh. Sometimes it's mentally. We're emotionally suffering. The wife that's being physically abused. The husband who's being emotionally abused. It's not always one way. There are men who suffer emotionally because their wives are just bad people. And they make their lives miserable, and there's suffering going on there. And we can't discount any of it because suffering is individual. I can't look at you and say, get over it. That's a world's worst thing you can say to somebody who's suffering. You just need to get over it. You need to buck up and get on with your life. Well, that's very easy for me to say, isn't it? On the outside looking in. So anyway, the idea of suffering it is not a man-made construct, although suffering has come into the world through man. God never wanted us to suffer, did He? What did He tell Adam and Eve? Listen, He's done this from the very beginning, from the first man, first woman, all the way up through today. He told Adam and Eve, listen, everything in this garden is yours. Everything. I'm not going to withhold any of it except. And if you just do this, you won't suffer, because He talks to them what their life's going to be about, what their life is going to be like after they chose to sin, suffering. Okay, a woman is going to give birth and have pangs of childbirth. She's going to suffer in her childbirth. I'm assuming that before then, There would still be the case of childbirth, but it wasn't going to hurt. It wasn't going to be a suffering. There wasn't going to be the travails of childbirth. And then he tells the husband, Adam, he says, you're going to dig out an existence for yourself in the ground. You're going to sweat. You're going to toil. You're going to work. And before then, it was just walking through the garden, picking things off the tree. I mean, just, enjoying everything. God never intended for them to suffer. He never wanted them to suffer. So when you think about that, you're exactly right. What was the cause of Adam and Eve's suffering? Was it God their cause of their suffering? Sin. Bad decisions, right? Bad decisions. That's what caused them to suffer. All right. Sure. Absolutely. If we didn't have the freedom of choice, then we would have a case against God. But we don't, right? How many people suffer through no actions of their own? Think about how many people have suffered because of the actions of somebody else that caused them to suffer, right? A drunk driver hits and kills your child as they're driving home from school one day. Okay, did you have anything to do with that? No. But are we suffering because of it? Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes our lives will never be the same again. All right, so let's think about this for just a couple seconds. Let's talk about this. The idea that a lot of people look at the concept of God, or they look at the idea of suffering as a case for the non-existence of God. They look at the evil in the world, and I've had people, posit this question to me. If there is a God, then why does He allow such suffering? You know what? The truth of the matter is that is an honest question. And we can't be too flip about dismissing that question. We have to be able to confront it with a little bit of logic. The idea of evil versus, that's what they say. Why is there suffering? Why is there evil in the world if there is a God? And see, by positing the question that way, they've contradicted themselves. The reason is, what if there is no God? There is no God. What makes the suffering? What makes what happened evil? You have to have a standard of good and evil in order for there. You have to have a standard of good in order for there to be evil. Otherwise, it's just circumstance. It's just circumstance. You can't say, well, there's no God, but there's evil. No. If there's no God, there's no good, there's no evil. We cannot, and they say, well, yeah, there is because we've determined it. That doesn't work either. The reason being is, who makes the determination whether something is good or evil or not? Another man? What makes his definition of good and evil any better than mine, or any different than mine? If there's no group of people in a room somewhere declaring something good or evil. If there is no God, then there is no good or evil. You can't declare it as such. In that case, you can't rail against it. There's not real suffering. This is just life. But there is suffering. There is suffering because of evil. And there is evil because God has brought the universe into existence and man has decided to rebel against Him. That's why evil is in the world. Okay? When people ask you that question, just start digging a little bit more. What's your determination about good and evil? Is this good? Is this evil? No, there isn't. Correct. If there's I'll put it this way, and I wrote this down. If there's a standard of right and wrong, then there must be someone that has the right to levy that standard and require, not only levy that standard, but require justice of those who violate it. Now, no one on earth has that ability to levy that standard of right or wrong. We've seen what happens when men decide what is right and what is wrong. That's one of the reasons we have evil in the world, because man has taken something that is opposed to God's natural law and has made it right. Then they've taken something that is obedience to God and said that it's wrong. So can we trust the standards of man, whether something is good or evil? No, we can't. Right or wrong? We can't trust man's standards. Now, if a man says something that's right, and we can look to the Scriptures and see where it backs him up, then yeah, I can take his. I agree with him. But I'm not really agreeing with him, am I? I'm agreeing with God. If a man stands and says something is wrong, and it falls directly into the standard that God says is wrong, I can look to that man and say, you're correct in what you're saying, but all you're doing really is mirroring what God has already said. There is nothing on this earth that we can rely on to determine whether something is right or wrong. That's why God says that we are to obey the law only in that it does not conflict with His law. So if man makes a determination that I can no longer stand the pulpit and preach against certain things, and it's happened before, it may happen again. What's my obligation? Is it to God or is it to man? God, 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 constant. That's not even a decision that, it's really not a decision that we make. It's a decision that He makes. We just have to decide whether we're going to agree with Him or not. Yeah, same question that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego asked. So, having said that, let's continue on. Verse 20, Job is wondering why God is keeping him alive when he desires death so much. Why is God allowing him to suffer like this? Good question. Good question. Remember, Job is ignorant of the circumstances surrounding his suffering. He has no idea. God didn't come to him and say, listen, if you don't mind, I'm going to show Satan exactly how wrong he is about you, and I'm going to engage, and it's not a wager. There's no wagering going on. Why is there no wagering? Because God knew Job's heart. He knew that Job was not going to deny him, to blaspheme against him, so that God would have to put him to death. He knew that. So if there's a definite outcome, is it considered a wager? It's not a wager, is it? You know, that's like taking bets on whether the sun's going to come up tomorrow. You know, it's like, well, you know, I don't know. I'll give you 2 to 1. I'm all about those odds. All right, I'll take those odds. There's no bet because there's no risk. There's no risk in God's heart. There's no risk in this whole venture. God knew the heart of His servant Job. And as we said last week, as Jesus is going to confess my name before His Father, God essentially confessed Job's name before Satan himself. Have you considered my servant Job? There is none like him. He is faithful. He is upright. He is righteous in all that he does. And Satan, not being the wisest of beings, decides he's going to put God to the test. He tempts God. Well, there's the problem. Yes, sir. Well, we're going to talk about that. I do, because that is a very good question. I've been confronted many times, and everybody has their own opinion about this. About what about taking our own life? What about suicide? Is that something that God would condone, or is that something God would condemn? If we take our lives, are we lost eternally, or is that something that God can see into our hearts and know our hearts and see that there was no other option for us? Whatever. It's a very good question, and I've been asked that quite a bit, and we're going to talk about that. Not tonight, but we are going to talk about it. All right, but we do know that Job does what? He wants what? He wants death. He wants death. He's ready for death to come. Remember, he doesn't know that God's going to bless him again. He doesn't know that God's going to restore everything he had. To Job's mind, this is it. This is how I'm going to live the rest of my life. I'm going to be in misery. Remember, he was not only suffering emotionally, he was suffering economically. Everything he had been taken. He had nothing left except a house, his wife, and a pit of ashes that he sat in to give some relief from that thing. He was also suffering physically. Remember, he had boils. And listen, I've had one. The idea of being covered from him from the tip of his head to the soles of his feet, he was covered in boils. They are painful. They are just touching it. The only thing I've found that people said it would be close to that is something like shingles. You imagine that all over covering your body from the tip of your head to the bottom of your feet. If you've ever had them, that would be just an excruciating way in which to live. So here's Job thinking, here it is. This is my life. I'm being punished for something. I don't know what it is. He's angry. Does he think he's angry at God? Would it be okay? Is it okay to be angry at God? Oh. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yep. Yep. He is angry. I believe he's angry, and like I said, you're not real sure. He's not real sure where to go with it. He's like, who am I supposed to be angry at? I believe there's a little bit of anger towards God. It's sort of a, but if you look at how he responds to his wife, he said, God, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. He never mourned the loss of his stuff, did he? He never mourned the loss of his things, his physical possessions. He mourned the loss of his children. His stuff is of no account to him, but he mourns the loss of his children because that is, that's part of his strength. That's part of his being. He certainly mourns the loss of them. But he never looks at God and said, well, I was supposed to have these things forever. Where did all my stuff go, Lord? He looks at it in the way that we're supposed to look at our physical possessions. If we woke up tomorrow and for some reason, whether it's through mismanagement or economic collapse or whatever it might be, say all of our money is in underneath our mattress, and somebody breaks in and takes everything, we got everything. The end of the day, the way we're supposed to look at our physical possessions is the way that Job looked at his physical possessions. Lord giveth, Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. If he gave it to me, he has every right in the world to take it away from me. I had it for a period of time, he took it away. And Job realized that everything he had, the Lord built a hedge around him. For some reason, God has seen fit, the Lord has seen fit to take this away from me. I don't know why. I think he was angry at his circumstances. Is it okay to be angry at the Lord? I think it is okay to be angry at the Lord. It's like anything else. Be angry, but sin not. It's okay to be angry. Angry doesn't always mean an accusatory type of anger. That's not always what it means. Sometimes we're angry because something happens to us. We're frustrated. What's that? That's exactly what I was going to say, Dan. You're absolutely right. I think it's a frustration type of thing. But you know what? When something like that occurs, when you think about the circumstances surrounding his children's death, how did they die? The people marauders didn't come down and kill them. How did they die? Yeah, it was what we would consider a natural cause. They were sitting in a house, they were drinking wine and having a party in the oldest son's house, and then wind came, knocked at the four corners of the house, and it fell down on top of them. At this case, it's sort of okay, I'm angry, but I don't know what to be angry at. Angry at nature? Well, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. It's like getting angry at a tornado. That's crazy to get angry at an inanimate force of nature. Where's the logical course of action? Be angry at God. Is it okay? Yeah. Just be careful about your anger. Remember? He said what Satan was hoping to tempt Job into was what? Curse God. To accuse him of the calamities that have befallen him. Not just be angry at him for it, to accuse him of it. And that was the problem. That was what in Satan's mind, this whole wager was about. I'm going to prove that if you take a servant, find your strongest servant, take him, and take away his stuff, and he'll accuse you. He'll curse you to your face. The problem is, a servant of God is, I wouldn't say immune to such things, but they're stronger than anybody else. Stronger than anybody else. All right? So here's Job. After all of these things are done, after all these things have happened, he's angry. All right? He's angry to the point of he wishes that he was no longer born. I can't blame him for that. Can you? It'd be tough to. He's dealing with this the very best he can. Remember, these things happen in the course of just about the course of a day. Short period of time. After one servant said something, another one came up, and another one came up, and another one came up, and another one came up. So in the course of a day, everything he had as far as physical possessions and a household are gone. And what does he do? He moans. He cries bitterly. He's upset. He's upset. He's upset. Well, to add literally insult to injury, or injury to insult, however you want to look at it, Satan goes and says, this is not a one-time thing. Satan goes back before God. He said, well, you took all he had, but strike him in the flesh. He'll curse you. That'll be the final straw. So what does he do? Don't take his life, but his body is in your hands. So he goes and he finds the most difficult thing to deal with he could think of. So here he is, lost everything he has, and now he is physically miserable. I mean, he can't eat, he can't sleep. I mean, you think about it. If you've got boils all over your body, can you find a way in which it's going to be comfortable to lay down and sleep? No. That's why he says he sat in the ashes. You know, he sat and as comfortable as ashes are kind of like a little bit more of a pillowy type thing. So he sits in these ashes, and he takes a pot shard and he scrapes his flesh to try to relieve the boils that are coming up. This is his existence, and this is as far as he thinks he's going to go. Now, having said that, do we see this in people today? Do we see people that honestly and truthfully in their minds, they look at their lives and they honestly and truthfully believe, and listen, with no evidence to the contrary, they believe that this is going to be their life for the rest of their lives. This is going to be the way they're going to exist for the rest of their existence. The marauders come in and took all of his livestock, took everything that would have made him a wealthy man. Marauders, well, it's different ones. They're, well, let's see. This is better. Yep. Hang on a second. Yep. All right. Chapter 2. Sorry, chapter 1. Verse 13, now there was a day when his sons and daughters were drinking and eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them when the Sabaeans raided them and took them away. Indeed, they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword. So he lost not only his livestock, but he lost the servants that were taking care of them. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Now, this is a servant saying this. Remember, God didn't do these things. Who did these things? Satan was allowed to do them. So here's a servant basically telling him that God was responsible for it, but it wasn't God that was responsible. God didn't do these things. He put them into servant's hands, or Satan's hands. 17, while he was still speaking, another also came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels and took them away, yes, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword. And I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, your sons and your daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and suddenly a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. So here we see 2 of them that are ascribed to bands of thieves that came in. One of them was ascribed to the fire of God, but God wasn't responsible for it. Satan was responsible for it. God gave him the power to do these things, but he didn't do these things himself. Then we have what we consider a natural occurrence. A strong wind came and knocked the house down. Okay, so he's lost all of his subsistence. There's nothing left for him. The only thing that's left is his house and his wife and his own physical body. And then Satan's getting ready to take that away from him as well. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. If you think about it, think about how young people are anyway. Young people are prone to big, bold actions, aren't they? They don't really think through their actions, do they? They're all about going big or going home, and that's how they do everything. The way they look at life is very much a sense of black and white. There's no shade of gray. Life is either fantastic or it's terrible. You know, I either love this person or I hate him with the passion of 1,000 suns. I mean, that's just everything is just very. There's a dichotomy. There's black and white. Everything is big. It's either really great or it's terrible. Well, the problem is, and studies have shown this as well, that with young people, I think it's up until about 25 or 26 years old, the part of their brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part of their brain that allows for thinking things through, isn't completely formed yet. Doesn't mean they don't have one. It just means it's not completely going through. That's why you think about the idea of what do you want to be when you grow up? I don't know. Why not? Well, the part of my brain that helps me predetermine that kind of thing isn't completely there yet. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. They also don't think about, hey, I'm being bullied right now in school, but you know what? Things are going to change. Things are going to change. I'm going to get a little older. I might bulk up a little bit where people might not be as prone to pick on me. I'm going to have a new set of friends. I'm going to go to another school. I'm not going to be in this school forever. At the end of the day, I'm going to turn 18. I'm going to graduate, and I'm going to go to college. I'm not even going to live in this town anymore. Kids can't quite think that way through, but you know what? Not only kids, but a lot of times even adults, when there's something going on in their life, they can't quite grasp the fact that this is not the end of it all. This is not the way that the rest of our life is going to go. Job is looking at this in a way that is completely understandable. He doesn't see a way out of this. He doesn't see a way out of this. He doesn't know that his health is going to be restored. He doesn't know that the Lord is going to shower. He's going to restore him with twice as much as he had before. And that's what it says at the end of the book. He gave him twice as much as he had. He doesn't know that. And you think about people who are suffering in a hospital bed, or are housebound, or are in an institution, or whatever it might be. We look at things, unfortunately, sometimes in a very myopic sense. We can't see the forest for the trees. We see, hey, this is the way my life is going to be. This is the way it's always going to be. And unfortunately, a lot of times we make our decisions based exclusively on that criteria. And what we need to do as Christians is to, above all things, be confident in the promise of something greater. Now, it may not be in this lifetime. That's what the hardest thing for us to understand and to grasp. It may not be in this lifetime. I may live the rest of my life in this bed. I may live the rest of my life in this institution. I may live the rest of my life without the use of my arms and my legs. I may live the rest of my life and my friends and family never come to an acceptance of the Lord. I might suffer like this, yes, for the rest of my physical life. But that's the small part of this eternal life cycle that we're undergoing. You had something you want to say? Yeah. Right. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He can absorb that. There may not be any lesson taught. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And that could have been. I know Satan was thinking those very thoughts. He's going to make maximum use of what he has at his disposal. So what did he do? He tried to hit Job with everything at once, where there would be no chance to even breathe. If he lost all the oxen, and then a month or two or a year down the road, he lost this. He's kind of able to process that. But it says, while one was talking, another one came up. While that one was talking, another one came up. And while that one was talking, another. So 4 huge pieces of devastating news at one time. Sometimes people get that, right? I mean, I dare say many of you sat in a doctor's chair, and that doctor comes in and says, got some bad news, right? Some people have sat in that chair more than once, and the doctor comes in and say, got some bad news. The tests don't look the way we hope they would. We'd like to do some. Guess what? And that's like sort of like somebody it's like getting hit in the chest. I mean, it really is. It's like getting hit right in the chest. You don't know. And what happens right then? Does the rational, logical, reasoning part of our brain take over? or does the emotional, human thought have control at that particular point in time? The emotional part of it. This is what's happening with Job. This is not the logical thing. When he's talking about, I wish I'd never been born, that's not the logical part of him talking. He's not logically speaking of that. He's emotionally speaking like that. And we have to make sure is that it's okay for both of those things to have a voice. It's okay for both the emotional and the logical part to have a voice. While emotionally we might think, you know what, right now, the way I'm thinking, I would almost rather have not been born. I would almost rather have, if I died tomorrow, I would be okay with that. There's also, we can't wallow in that either, right? We can't just lay back and say, well, I'm going to let the emotional part of my mind have free reign. Eventually, at some point, we have to get up and do something. We can't live our lives flailing about. We have to decide what we're going to do. I've seen and I've heard of people who have been diagnosed with a life-threatening disease. I mean, it's like, look, this is what we have to do. But what they do is they allow the emotional part of them to handcuff them and prevent them from doing the logical thing, which is to get care, to get whatever it is taken care of. And they go home and they're paralyzed by it. They're paralyzed by that emotional part of it, not the logical part of it. Well, this is what's now Job really can't do much at this particular point in time. There's really not much he can do. He's still processing this. We don't know how long it is, in between the time that he lost his creature comforts and then how long it was before that he lost his health. But we do know that he sat down and just began to give that emotional part of it free rein to speak. And when you read it, you think, well, he's not he's engaging in gibberish. He's not. He's giving a very eloquent. He's opening his mouth and giving an eloquent statement to his condition. He is. You look at the way it reads, and it's very poetic in the way that it reads. But he's allowing that emotional aspect of his character to have free voice, to speak what comes into his mind. And sometimes we got to do that. Rail at the unfair. Is it unfair? Yes, it's unfair. Is it unjust? Yes, it's unjust. Is it wrong? Yes, it's wrong. All of these things that happened to him were wrong. Why? Because Satan was at the heart of it. But yes, it's okay to be angry and to rail at the injustice of it all. Certainly is. And that's why when people get emotional and want to talk, let them talk. We sit down with a brother or sister and they're angry, they're frustrated, and in some ways they're embittered towards something that's happened. You let them talk. They may not have had an opportunity to say that before. A lot of times people will start and they say, "Well, you don't mean that. You don't mean that. You don't know what you're saying. You don't think about what you're saying." They have. That's the way they feel right now. We're talking about what is suffering. We also got to talk about how the best way to alleviate suffering. Okay, so. Yeah. You're right. Once they see what death really is, they realize very quickly that that's really not what they want. What they want is release from pain, and the only thing they see is death being that release. Okay, that's where we as Christians, not only with our brothers and sisters in Christ, but with those who are outside the church, say, look, what? Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this idea of release from pain. And we let them give voice to what they have in their hearts, and then we show them the best way to have that release from pain, what we can do for them, because we can be a great resource, and we should be. Mm-hmm. I've never had anybody give voice to that to me as far in regards to that. I've had people say I think I would rather just be dead. I've heard people say that, but I've never had anybody tell me I just want to kill myself. I want to end it all. I've never had anybody say that. Although I do know of members of the church who have taken their life because of a pain that's in their life. Now not a physical pain. Most of the times it's an emotional pain. It's a psychological thing, and that's where most, if not all, where most suicides come from, is from an emotional pain, psychological pain. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. If that's what kept him from doing it, then hey, listen, I'm glad I'm glad there was some, but the truth of the matter, that if you think about that, why do we not do a lot of things? Why do we not engage in a lot of sin? We know we understand the consequences. That's not an unreasonable thing. I'm glad that kept him from doing it. But listen, that's the reason that we don't do a lot of things that we have in mind to do. There's a lot of times when I was a kid, when I was a young person, young fella, and I had a little bit of freedom. There's a lot of times that I was tempted to do certain things. I mean, people would ask me, "Hey, you want to do this?" And the thing that petrified me more than anything else was getting found out by my mom and dad and my grandfather. Those are the three people. The whole church knew about it as long as my mom and dad, and my grandfather did not find I'd be okay. But that was the big fear. I didn't drink and drive because if I got pulled over, guess what? My parents and my grandfather are going to be mortified. That's why. So our faith, a lot of times, is a break against doing something. It's a break against doing something that would be eternal in the aspect of your own call, or temporary in the aspect of the sin that we commit in the world today. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And listen, that's what Job is engaged in. Why am I still here? Why am I still here? He's praying to the very, it's irony in the fact that he's praying for the very God that allowed him to go through these things and and release Satan to do these things to him. He's praying to this very same God who is saying, listen, I'm using you as an object lesson in the truest sense of the word. I'm using you as an object lesson towards the adversary. That's what Satan means, is adversary. I'm using you as an object lesson against the adversary. Don't give up. But see, if you do that, it ruins the lesson. If God had told him what he was going to do, it's no longer a lesson. He's just going along with a plot. That doesn't work. It had to appear, it had to be genuine on the part of Job, and it was. That's exactly what Job's doing. Why am I still here? Take me now. I would rather have never left my mother's womb rather than suffer this. And I understand that. Absolutely. Uh-huh. Yep. Yep. Job is considered by a great many people to be one of the finest examples of literature, religious or otherwise. They said this is a lesson. He said even if you took out God, you could. I'm not saying we should. I'm saying you could take the supernatural aspect of it out, and you would have a primer on how to deal with suffering in your life and how not to deal with it, how not to help others deal with it. But that is the case. That's the sense of the word. The truest sense of the word. It is a primer on how to deal with suffering in our lives. Certainly so. All right, verse 21. Somebody read verse 21 for me. All right. So the idea is, say that again. Read that first part again. Okay. So he longs for death, and what does he say right after that? He longs for death, and it doesn't come. What does it say right after that? Okay. So the idea here is that he's talking about death as something that would be that people would actively seek out. We were in Seattle. We went through this little tour around the city, and they were talking about the big gold rush. There was a big gold rush up in the Pacific Northwest. It transferred from there up into the Yukon. But while it was going on in the Pacific Northwest, up close to Seattle, They said everybody, every tin horn wanted to come up there and be a miner. These were people who were about as ill-suited to mining as you possibly could imagine. These guys showed up in suits. They thought it was going to be a matter of, I'm just going to go take my shovel and I'm going to knock over some rocks and there's going to be a big pile of gold. We're just going to be able to scoop it up and walk out with it. That's not exactly the case. But then you had people that were very serious about it. They put a lot of time and thought and processed what needed to be done. And this idea here is that these guys are, Job is actively seeking death as you would mine for treasure, as you would mine for gold and silver and all the precious metals. What do? You don't knock over rocks to do it. What do you have to do to mine? I mean, it is back-breaking, sweat-inducing, heat stroke-inducing labor. You work. Do you ever get much out of it? Most people, no, they never do. Very, very little reward for all of that effort. But this is what he's talking about. Death is something that he would pursue as you would dig for treasure in the earth. It's that precious to him. But you notice that he never says that he's going to take his own life or he's going to seek death actively. It's passive. I wish death would come to me, but I'm not going out to seek after it. We'll talk about the idea of suicide next time because we're at the end of our class. So we're going to finish up 22 and we'll do 23 next week. Anybody got anybody made any great notes over the last week that they want to bring up? Add to our discussion. It's a big concern because while we might not want to think about it, there are people in the Lord's church who are emotionally unwell and they have problems. I know of one who was, I guess for lack of a better word, bipolar, and he ended up taking his own life. He thought there was nothing. He got to a depth of suffering that he felt that he could not get through. And the truth of the matter is he could not get through it on his own. That was the problem, though. That was as far as he went with it. I can't handle it. I can't deal with this. Therefore, it can't be dealt with or handled. And unfortunately, he took his own life. So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about that. Suicide is a very real concern. And I imagine there's almost every family's dealt with it in one way, shape, or form. I've had to preach several funeral sermons for people who have committed suicide. It's a tough thing. It's very interesting. There are people I've spoken with families who their family member has gone through some horrible things, some just awful health issues, has passed away, and they can handle that better than a family member who has taken their own life. Because there are so many questions, unanswered questions there they just can't process. So that's the idea. A lot of times people suffer in silence. And we wake up and find that they've taken their own life. We didn't even know there was a problem. Oh, doesn't matter. Any age. Doesn't matter. I look at the ways the idea of suffering, the idea of having those kinds of issues, the having grown up, quote unquote, grown up in the church and existed in it all of my waking moments. I mean, I think about folks who are suffering, and they're suffering alone. They may have friends, but there's a far greater difference. There's a big difference in suffering, and you've got some friends, and suffering when you've got a church family that acts as that. It's a release, right? It's a pressure release. I'm suffering for cancer, but my church family has fixed us dinners. They have visited us. They pray for us. They pray with us. They've driven me to doctor's appointments. They've so forth and so forth. And you just go in, and sometimes there'll be little ways in which we assist each other, and we don't even realize that they're that big of a thing. I was in such a bad shape until I opened my mailbox, and there was a card, and it was from one of my sisters in Christ. I opened it up, and I read it, and then my day it went from being I felt lousy to feeling like, you know what, I can go one more day because of that. We can't discount anything we do to alleviate suffering, not one thing. Never believe that the thing that we're going to do, no matter how small, won't help. That's a dangerous way to think, because guess what we do? Unless I can do some big, huge thing, I just won't do anything. Man, sometimes it's just a small matter of thought about you, I'm praying for you, I pray for you every single day, and boy, it's like, man, I can get up. I can get up and I can go and do what I need to do. And you know what? The doctors will say the same thing. They'll tell you very quickly, while they may not be religious themselves, while they may think the religion itself is of no use, they said that without exception, the patients who take news the best, and the patients who give it more of a fighting chance, are those who are themselves have a faith in a higher power. That tells us something. That means there's a physical aspect to our emotional faith. That's a good thing. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We're going to finish up. Next week we'll continue on, and what we're going to do right now is we're going to have a song of invitation, and we talk about suffering, and there may be some suffering going on that we are not aware of, and we want to pray. When we allow somebody to pray for us, when we tell them what's going on, it's an act of intimacy between us and our brothers and sisters in Christ. But when we allow someone to pray for us, it is giving rise to their service, and we cannot disallow somebody from being of service to us. Let us be of service to you. If you need the prayers of the congregation here tonight, come while we stand and while we sing.
Dear brother, oh, why do you tarry so long? Your Savior is waiting to